സംസാരിക്കുന്ന സമയത്ത് മാത്രം സ്പീക്കർ ഓൺ ചെയ്തോളാം. എല്ലാ സമയത്ത് തന്നെ വീഡിയോ ഓൺ ചെയ്യുക. സാറിന് എഴുതിച്ച് മാറണമെന്നുള്ളത്
ഒന്ന് മാറണം. Good morning. This is Amit Prakash.
Morning. Video on. Video ആക്കിയിട്ട് എന്റെ പടം ഇതിനകത്ത് ഇപ്പുറത്ത് കിടക്കും.
Hello, Dr. Chang.
Good morning, Amish.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
It's fine, thank you. It's very well.
Hi, I'm fine. Are you joining from Korea or from Thailand?
I am staying in Thailand.
You are in Thailand right now.
Yes.
Welcome, Dr. Chang.
Yes. It's my pleasure.
Good morning, Dr. Santosh.
Good morning, sir. Good morning.
Good morning. We have Dr. Chang from UN, United Nations.
Yeah. Okay. Nice to meet you, sir.
I am looking for other speakers.
Excuse me, Amish. During my presentation, please you uploading to my slides and turn the next page when I say to the next, please.
I will do that. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
If you want, you can also change your slides.
Okay, it's fine to me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can you just rename yourself as just give your name?
My name is Chang Yong-sun.
No. Let me just. You're logged in as ICT1211.
So it's maybe not correct information.
You are made the co-host. Yes. So I think you can upload your slides.
Yes.
If you want, just check. Why don't you just see if you are able to share your screen?
Sharing screen.
Is Mr. Jayant Bhatnagar here?
I will come back to another ID.
Sure.
pregnant women are able Good morning, Dr. Santosh. Dr. Amit.
I'm mute.
Good
Good
morning,
morning,
sir.
Mr. Safarullah.
Yeah, Safrullah sir. Sir.
Yeah, I just wanted to check. There's a video of Dr. Shireen that has to be played. Who will do that?
Sir. Sorry, sir.
Yeah, there's a video that Dr. Shireen Madon had sent. I had forwarded to Dr. Gayatri.
Schedule.
Will you do that, or shall I play it? Is it okay if I do that?
Yeah, our presentation, everything. We will do that, sir.
You will do that?
Yeah, I don't know. അതല്ല ഇവിടെ ഉണ്ടാവും ഷെയർ ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുമോ അത് പ്രവീൺ മാനേജ് ചെയ്തില്ലേ in our center it will manage, sir.
Okay, thank you. So we'll first have Mr. Jayant Bhatnagar from CDOT. Then
Yes.
we'll have Dr. Chang from United Nations. Then we'll play then we'll have Dr. Shireen Madon.
Yes.
Then we'll go to Joyojit, Dr. Joyojit. I don't see him here. And then we'll have Anju Mangal. Anju, have you joined?
Yes, she is there. Anju is there.
Hello,
Anju. How are you?
Namaste and Namaskaram. How are you all?
Namaskaram.
Yeah,
Namaskaram, yeah.
So my colleague Osama, which I'm sure most of you already know of, will be joining. And so we will have a joint presentation, but we promise to keep it within 12 to 15 minutes.
Sure. Thank you. And how is Fiji? Hope the cyclone after effects are now taken care of.
I did say to Osama and of course to you, Amitji, that in case my connectivity goes down, he'll take over. But I will try to get on again. So, but we've got that part covered. Things
Sure.
are okay, but obviously it's a response plan now, so we will recover.
Thank you for joining, Anju. Thank you. I don't see Osama. Has Osama joined? Osama,
I will.
yeah.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, hello, Osama.
Hi, Amit. How are you?
Good to see you here.
Yes. Hi, Anju.
Hello, Osama.
Mr. Jayant, are you here? Mr. Jayant Bhatnagar?
Yes, I've joined.
Okay, great. So
Hello.
we have everyone here. So do you want
Hello,
me
good morning,
to
everyone.
put up your slides, Mr. Jayant?
It's okay. Yeah, it would be okay if you did that, or I could try it from here. If that doesn't work, we can use yours.
Sure. So let me just make you the host. Can you make?
Or in that case, you do it.
Mr. Jayant a co-host also?
എനിക്ക് ഈ സ്ലൈഡൊക്കെ അവിടെ ഓപ്പറേറ്റ് ചെയ്തില്ലേ സ്ലൈഡ്
Yeah, Jayant, he has logged in as Jayant, and Dr. Chang has logged in as ICT1211.
So my name is incorrect. However, I'm logging out again. It is very difficult to rename my names.
Oh, you're finding it difficult? Let me rename it for you.
Yes, it's fine. Thank you.
Sir, I think that a presenter can load their presentation from there itself.
Right. Thank you very much.
Have I spelled it correctly?
Yes.
Thank you. So the host, whoever is the host, please make Dr. Chang and Jayant as co-hosts also. Joyojit, are you able to see Dr. Joyojit Pal?
മെസ്സേജ് അയച്ചു 11:30 ആയോ? അത് വന്നു കേട്ടോ. വെബ്സൈറ്റിലെ അടിയിലാണ്. Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all. On behalf of Kerala State Planning Board, Government of Kerala, I welcome our esteemed guest to the Kerala Luksagar Conference. We are honored to have you here today in this session on e-governance. Before we proceed to the session, I would like to draw kind attention to all participants towards certain guidelines to be followed in this online conference session. I request all participants to mute their audio while others are speaking. Participants are requested to address their queries through the chat box and use the discussion time to express their views or clarify their doubts. I also request speakers to strictly adhere to the scheduled time of their session. We look forward to an interesting session. I now request Sri Muhammad Safarullah IAS to take over the introductory welcome address. Over to Safarullah sir.
Esteemed panelists, members of the State Planning Board, staff of Government of Kerala, members from IT industry, viewers, a warm good morning. At the outset, I would like to thank the State Planning Board for the opportunity to share a few thoughts and address the panelists and viewers today. Kerala has come a long way in the areas of information technology, particularly in the areas of e-governance. The state of Kerala was one of the first movers in the area of e-governance almost 2.5 decades back. One of the pioneer intervention which the government made at that time in the early 2000, that is around 2002-2003, was the project of Akshaya. Akshaya, or as we call the Common Service Centers, the CSCs, was initially envisaged as a digital literacy mission. And over a period of time, it transformed itself as a common service center. Another intervention which the government did was to introduce the project IT at School. That is, instead of learning IT as an additional subject, the part of IT was gradually included in the curriculum. With these projects, what happened is the population became digitally aware. They started demanding services, which eventually led the government also to move more and more additional services in the areas of e-governance. I would like to briefly highlight 3 points which the department is working on today. The first one is in designing an ecosystem in the areas of emerging technology, particularly e-governance. For example, we have the Kerala Blockchain Academy, which is working in the areas of skilling and training in blockchain. Another example is where we are working in introducing innovative projects in government departments through our partners, NIC National Informatics Center, Government of India, and CDAC, Center for Development in Advanced Computing. We are trying to introduce various projects in e-governance. The state departments of CDIT, IT Mission, which is the nodal department, are also in this particular activities. The second aspect is in creating a robust infrastructure. Once we have the supply, it is important that we have infrastructure to provide this e-governance. Towards this, we have the state-of-art data centers, which are cloud-enabled. And another ambitious project which Government of Kerala is working on is the K4 project, the Kerala Fiber Optic Network project. This project will connect about 30,000 government offices this year, which will include all schools and hospitals. This will enable the departments and hospitals and schools to launch innovative services through this high-end bandwidth connectivity, and will also help us in addressing the digital divide. The third and another important aspect is in creating a robust startup ecosystem. I'm sure the sessions that we have today will help us in strategizing and getting ideas on the direction in which the state has to move forward in the future. The Government of Kerala and IT department is keenly looking forward for the suggestions which will flow out of this Kerala Looks Ahead conference to strategize the way ahead in the areas of e-governance. I once again thank all the panelists for sharing their thoughts and suggestions through this conference. I would now go on to my duty. It's my privilege to welcome all the esteemed panelists who have joined across the globe to share their thoughts today. We are looking forward for your thoughts and suggestions, particularly in the context of the COVID and the disruption, digital transformation which is happening across. So the models we have built up in the past may not be and will not be sufficient to take us forward. So we are counting on your suggestions, which will help us in building a strategy. On behalf of Government of Kerala and IT department, I would like to welcome all the panelists who are going to share their thoughts today. I would like to welcome all the viewers who have connected today to also contribute in the form of question and answer sessions and also commit ideas in the future. Thank you once again and have a good day.
You are on mute, Dr. Santosh.
Now I would like to invite Professor Amit Prakash to chair the sessions. Professor Amit Prakash is an associate professor at the International Institute of Information Technology, Bangalore. He has been involved in setting up the Institute Center for IT and Public Policy. His interests lie in information systems and public policy, particularly in development sectors such as public health, nutrition, education, skill development, and food and livelihood security. Prior to joining IIIT Bangalore, Professor Amit worked over 15 years on advisory levels in two prestigious institutes, PricewaterhouseCoopers and CDAC. He has a doctorate degree in information system from IIM Bangalore and a bachelor's degree in civil engineering in IIT Roorkee. Very wonderful profile. Now I welcome Professor Amit Prakash to chair this session. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Santosh, and thank you, Mr. Safirullah. We are welcome everyone to the sessions on e-governance. We are very grateful to the Kerala State Planning Board and Government of Kerala for inviting the Center for IT and Public Policy at IIIT Bangalore, where my colleague Dr. Janki Srinivasan and I have been involved in discussing with all of you on the plan for these sessions. So thank you very much for getting us here. Thank you for providing us this opportunity and platform. It's so good to see so many people, so many interested experts join us today for this interesting discussion, interesting set of discussions on e-governance. E-governance, as all of us know, is broadly related to governance and related to the use of information technology in governance. Governance continues to be very important when we are looking at anything related to e-governance, and therefore the governance milestones and the governance benchmarks that Kerala has set continues to be relevant when it comes to adopting electronic and digital technologies, when it comes to e-governance and use of digital technologies. So with that very brief background, the e-governance sessions, we have 3 sessions spread across 3 thematic 3 themes. The first one is what we are in today on citizen access to services, and with the perspective of leading towards a better empowerment of citizens. We have another session following this session, which looks at decision support systems and analytics in order to enable better governance. Okay. And the third one is related to legal and policy dimensions, particularly focusing on privacy and security aspects. In this session on citizen access to services and empowerment, we have 5 speakers, 5 eminent speakers, and I'll take a couple of minutes to introduce all our distinguished speakers today. We'll start with Mr. Jayant Bhatnagar, who has been serving as director on the board of Center for Development of Telematics, CDOT, for over 15 years. He has led the development of intelligent networks, asynchronous transfer mode technology, MAX-NG, Wi-Fi broadband systems, next generation systems, network systems, etc., and is presently working on the first indigenous 4G, 5G cloud-based mobile network technology. He has been a consultant to the Universal Service Obligation Fund Administration, and as a part of which his team undertook detailed planning for the first rollout of mobile communication infrastructure in rural and remote areas of the country. Welcome, Mr. Jayant Bhatnagar. Our second speaker would be Dr. Chang Yong Son, who is currently serving as an expert on ICT in the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific in Thailand. I think he's stationed in Bangkok right now. Before joining UNESCAP, Dr. Chang has served as director at the Ministry of Science and ICT in the Republic of Korea. He has worked for ICT regulatory institutions, including the Korea Broadcasting Commission, Korea Communications Commission, and the Ministry of Science, ICT, and Future Planning. Welcome to the session, Dr. Chang. We have our third speaker, who unfortunately is not able to join the session, but has sent a recorded message, recorded video, is Dr. Shireen Madon, who is an associate professor working jointly in the departments of international development and management at the London School of Economics in the United Kingdom. Her areas of research include evaluating the effectiveness of village health governance, studying the extent to which digital identity schemes or digital identity platforms improve delivery of social welfare programs, and investigating the extent to which UNHCR's current strategy to open its digital identity platform for improving refugee management creates value to third-party stakeholders and to refugees. Welcome, Dr. Madone. Dr. Joyjit Pal will be our fourth speaker. He is a principal researcher at Microsoft Research India. His research interests are in social media and society in the global south. Issues such as online political communication, misinformation, and changes in work practices. He has worked in accessibility and the role of accessible technology in expanding workplace opportunities in the global south. Joyjit also holds a position as an associate professor at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor in USA. Welcome to the panel, Dr. Paul. Our fifth panelist is Ms. Anju Mangal, who is the Asia Regional Coordinator, Alliance for Affordable Internet at the World Wide Web Foundation. Anju's work focuses on strengthening the Alliance's national coalitions and support stakeholder collaborations to advance our shared goal of affordable access across Asia. Anju was affiliated with the Pacific Community as the Digital Transformation ECM Specialist and Business Analyst Advisor. She was recently awarded the Obama Foundation Leadership Fellowship and the US State of Department International Visitors Leadership Program on Digital Economy and Cybersecurity. Anju would be joined by her colleague, Mr. Osama Manzar, who is a global leader on the mission of eradicating information poverty from India and the global south using digital tools through an organization he co-founded in 2002, the Digital Empowerment Foundation. With over 25 years of experience, Osama has worked in the areas of journalism, new media, social enterprise, before he established the foundation to digitally empower the masses. His organization has a footprint of 700 locations and 9,000 plus digital food soldiers across 130 districts in 24 states. Welcome, Osama. So welcome all the panelists to this session. We also extend a very warm welcome to all those who have who are present here for this session. Without taking any more time, let me hand over the floor to Mr. Jayant Bhatnagar from CDOT for his talk. My request to all the speakers is to limit their talk to about 14 to 15 minutes so that we have time towards the end for some interactions. I believe Dr. Santosh has already mentioned this, but just to reiterate, please ensure that any questions you have are typed out in the chat window, and we will take it towards the end as appropriate. Thank you very much, and let me invite Mr. Jayant to begin his talk.
Thank you, Amit. I just load my presentation. Give me a minute. Are you able to see the screen?
No, it's not yet.
Amit? Okay. Amit, can you flash it from your side?
Okay, let me do that.
Yep. Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm Jayant Bhatnagar, Director CDOT. So just quickly walk in the next 10 to 12 minutes through what CDOT is doing in the area of ICT. Am I audible? Is it okay?
Yes, it is fine.
Okay. So CDOT was set up in 1984 as a research institution under the government of India. And since then, we have been focusing on developing technologies for the country, specifically trying to address the issues of the country using technology. Next. So these are some of the achievements or what we have been doing over the years. I would not go into detail of each one of these. Next. And CDOT's contribution since 1984, since its inception, has been over the decades. We have been contributing technologies, and we have been contributing towards uplift of the rural population mainly. That's what has been our effort so far. Next. We have two offices, one in Delhi and one in Bangalore. And we have about a strength of 1,000 engineers, out of which we have about 1,000 staff, out of which we have 900 engineers. Most of these are coming from the government institutions, the engineering institutions. Next. CDOT broadly works in the following areas. We have a division in software applications, optical technologies, switching technologies, which includes switches, routers, and network access equipment. Then we work in telecom security, wireless technologies, and network management systems. These are the broad areas in which CDOT focuses its efforts. Next. So now we'll just quickly go through the kind of contributions CDOT has made, the kind of technologies that have been adapted for Indian conditions. The first one of those is called PON, Passive Optical Network. This is a technology that was used for deploying the BharatNet 1. Now we are in the BharatNet phase 2. PON is actually a technology where we take an optical signal and we take it along the fiber and passively split the signal so that it can be distributed to multiple people. This is more of an access technology. When we say passive, it means at the point of splitting, you don't need any power. And that's the strength of this technology, because if you're in the rural areas, we are able to take it out, spread it out in the rural areas without requiring powering at every point of split. So this technology was used, as I said, for BharatNet 1. For BharatNet 2, CDOT has evolved a technology called XGS-PON, which is the last statement you're seeing here. That is 10G PON. So the first technology would deliver up to 1 gigabit bandwidth to every Gram Panchayat. And the XGS-PON will now be able to upgrade that to 10 gigabit per Gram Panchayat. Next. The complementary technology to PON is the last mile technology. Last mile technology, CDOT has focused on using the common Wi-Fi technology. We have taken Wi-Fi and made it outdoor Wi-Fi for the Indian conditions. This equipment will connect to the box where the passive optical network will end. And from then on, it will distribute in the last mile. So this is a last mile wireless technology for distribution, very low cost technology, very effective. And this was first pioneered by in India by CDOT. And then it was adopted by USOF, and now it's been adopted by all CSCs. And we are seeing a lot of deployment of Wi-Fi hotspots all over the country. So CDOT has gone forward because we are a research institution. We are not actually getting into commercial deployments. That is done by organizations which take transfer of technology from CDOT. We have now introduced the Wi-Fi 6 technology, which will give us up to 1 gigabit on wireless networks in the last mile. Next. This is a product which is called Gyan Setu. As we were rolling out these technologies, we were observing there was a lot of illiteracy, especially in the northern parts of the country. So although we could take internet to the people, but they were unable to use it. So what we decided was to somehow find out a way of how illiterate people could also be engaged on the internet. And that's where we designed this box. This is a technology which gives you a pictorial navigation. So you could connect it to the internet and connect it to the TV. And for example, the farmers who are illiterate, they would want to know where to sell their product. So they would just, they would get a menu saying that they are farmers. We would give them cards, and from their cards, it will be, encoded on their card what kind of information they want. Those cards will be slided along this slide bar, and the farmer will be able to log in. And after that, he will see on the screen, he would just see pictures of the produce that he was interested in, which was encoded in the card. And he would just do a touch screen on one of those pictures. We would do the search on the internet and the different mandis and bring the prices to them so that they are able to find out where best to sell their produce. So this is what is called Gyan Setu. This is a product which is very unique, and we got an excellence award from the ITU for this product. Next. Next, please. These are technologies, which is a set of technologies which we call next generation networks. These are essentially technologies which are meant for creating infrastructure, ICT infrastructure, which includes routers, switches, and soft switches. Soft switches are software equivalent of telephone exchanges, and also of the 5G and 4G mobile core that we are working on today. So this constitutes the core of the network, and these are all indigenized now, and we are able to provide services in large numbers to the rural population. Now we are looking at deploying these systems in the urban areas. So when we say routers and switches, our focus presently is on doing the infrastructure for the data centers, because that is what eventually the entire communication network would converge to. It would become a set of interconnected data centers. That's what we are targeting. So while it happens today, but all of this is imported equipment today, and our effort is, our endeavor is to indigenize all of this and have it done locally in India, including servers, switches, routers, access equipment, everything. So you have to go back, please. Yeah, next. These are some of the applications which we are running off of our data centers. This is one of them. This is called the Disaster Preparedness and Management System. These are early warning systems which are meant for disseminating messages, warning messages to the general population. And we have been very successful, and I think like all our other technologies, Kerala has been very, very supportive of CDOT's effort, and we have always taken our technology and first tried them in Kerala. So same is the case here. During the Kerala floods, this system was used, and we have been using this system since then in a lot of other states for different purposes. This would actually send the messages out on any kind of media. Earlier, it started with mobile, but now we are able to send messages on mobile, TV, radio, satellite, and so on. So this is a system which can and has been used, even, we look at the next slide, even for COVID messages. Next, please. This is a COVID Savdhan application. The server side of this is what we saw earlier. Sorry, I think this is the client side is a mobile application in this case, and this was meant for actually sending targeted messages to specific areas, warning people. And during this COVID, these 12 months of COVID, I think we have sent over 320 crore messages using this system. Next. Another software application, mobile application. Another mobile application is that we have introduced is called Samvad. This is a very secure application and is the Indian equivalent of WhatsApp. This is presently widely in use in the government departments. It is right now in English, and we are now translating it into multiple languages, Indian languages. So this is a very secure application, and we are expecting that the government would be utilizing this for all secure communications. Next, please. The next tool that was developed during the COVID times was a browser-based video conferencing system like what we are using Zoom right now. So this is again done by CROT, and it was done for the government organizations for enabling work from home and for e-learning. This is also a hosted application which is being used by several institutes in the country and by several government departments. There are lots of features it has. Some of the features are mentioned, if you can see here. I would not go into the details in interest of time. And this is a application which we would like to launch as to the public as well. Next. This is another application in software, which is a face recognition or object recognition system. This is designed for the security agencies, so they are able to spot out specific individuals or specific objects in places, public places like airports and the railway stations and so on. This is an equipment which is going on trial now, and it can be used for surveillance and access control and finding missing people. For office attendance, and yes, and help the visually impaired people as well. Next, please. There's another application which is called Wayfinder. This is the Google Maps is for the external world. The Wayfinder is for internal building navigation. Very useful product. This was actually designed as a gift from India for the United Nations by the DoD. And this can be used very effectively for exhibitions, hospitals, and any large public places which are in building. Next, please. The next product is a interoperable set-top box. We all know that today all the set-top boxes are very closely tied to the service providers. Like Dish TV has its own set-top box, and Tata has its own set-top box. So this is a product that was designed to work like a mobile. You can just put in a SIM, and then you could have a single set-top box and connect to any other service provider. So this has been evaluated and trials have been done by TRI right now. Next, please. So CDOT's contribution has been to various government programs, and I would just want to thank the government of Kerala, because Kerala has been very, very supportive of CDOT's efforts, and any technology since 1984 which has been first tried in and ruggedized in Kerala and then taken to the rest of the country. So thank you very much. If there are any questions, I would like to take it at the end of the session. We can skip these slides in interest of time. Amit, how are we doing with time?
Yeah, I think it would be good if you can wrap it up now.
Okay, fine. So we just skip these. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jain. That was a wonderful glimpse into technology development, especially from the technologies have been deployed, or how technologies Yeah, I guess there was yeah, am I audible now? Yeah. So thank you, Mr. Jayant. We'll move on to Dr. Chang for his presentation on
Amit, if you are hearing, you are not audible and we missed you altogether.
Oh, I'm sorry. There was, I think there was a temporary internet issue. We'll move over to Dr. Chang now. Dr.
Yes.
Chang?
Yes, I'm ready.
Yes, you can share your screen and we'll move over to you. I'm
Yes.
sorry for that slight delay. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fine. Please share my presentations to us.
You want me to share your screen?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, sharing. Thank you, chairs. Good afternoon and good morning to all of us. So I'm Chang Yong-sun from United Nations Economic and Social Economics for Asia and the Pacific. It's great pleasure to participate in these meetings. I will shortly presenting digital government against COVID-19 pandemics in Korea. Next, please. Next, please.
Yeah, is this the right slide?
Still yet?
You want the next slide?
Yes. Next page.
Dr. Chan, do you want this slide or the earlier one?
Yes. I cannot see the screen.
Amit, I think the thing is not showing on the screen. Maybe you have to flash the PDF. Are you using the PDF version of the file?
No, this is the PPT.
Yeah, it takes a long time. Maybe you just convert it to PDF and put it up. That will be much faster.
Yes. This page. Okay, thank you. This page. Okay, thank you. Of the past decades, the world had achieved the incredible before. Second page, please. One page ahead, please. Excuse me, one page ahead, please. Yes, thank you, Chair. Of the past decade, the world had achieved incredible ICT development. Increasing number of people have harnessed such development, as shown in the pie charts. Particularly, more people are using fixed and mobile broadband, which provide enhanced communication and connecting us during the lockdown and restricting freedom of movements. But not all the countries are in position to enjoy such opportunity and benefits, as evidenced by the persistent digital gaps between development and the development countries in various connectivity indicators. In this context, ICT development in Korea has drawn attention. According to the biannual surveys, Korea has constantly been in the top 5 countries, such as first and second place in the every index of the surveys. In terms of IT development, the nation can be named connected nations. As you might know, in the telecom operator in Korea is already launching the first 5G network service in 29, connecting more than 11 million as of today, and most of the person or people can access by the internet in the region. I suppose that those give the background to how the nations adopted digital technology to address COVID-19 and protect citizens from the pandemic crisis. Next, please. Yes, digital infrastructure throughout crisis management is much discussed in agenda in these days. Like most of the Asia and the Pacific region, the government has attempted to control pandemics throughout digital technology. Nevertheless, at least in Korea, it cannot deny that high connectivity, digital devices, and people's engagement have significantly contributed to the address the testing impacted person to treatment or tracing the persons. The countries apply digital technology to tracking process of COVID-19 to slow down the spread of infection. For instance, testing's artificial intelligence was used for the testing kits and the diagnosis as well as the digital devices. And the digital systems and application were supported for tracing and treatment. Next, please. Yes. In order to overcome the unprecedented crisis, Korea is mobilizing ICT development throughout the public-private partnership. Because of the solid digital government system and the outstanding technical assistance from public sectors can address the national crisis, and people in Korea have been able to maintain their lives coexisting with the COVID-19. For instance, citizens can easily check how many public masks are left at each store and check the health condition of themselves by mobile application. Despite shutdown of the nationwide school, students can access school thanks to the solid online education system and digital devices and the digital infrastructure. Indeed, the current pandemic shows that what is the matter of the digital technologies from schooling, working, and even recovering measure. Next, please. Korea has numerous government platforms providing customized service for each groups of people, and people can simply searching possible benefits and apply for it by online. These technologies government empowers citizens to building block for better lives by social service, particularly supporting such as small business and disadvantaged social classes. Throughout the advanced digital government system by means of integration and coordinated systems, you can see these slides. People can access and request their benefits and service in the crisis. Next, please. Yes. During the current COVID-19 crisis, one of the success cases in Korea in terms of digital government can be the smart management system, which engages about 28 governments and private agents to leverage digital infrastructure to protect the public and to preventing further infections. The tracking of the infected person was carried out by the manual process at the early stage of a breaking out clusters. However, the government replaced the system's full-fledged digital processing, integration, and connecting all data and information, which bring out efficiency, cost saving, and removing bureaucracy and save the person. After application of the smart management system, it takes just only 10 minutes for confirmed case to be traced automatically. The outcome can be contributed to the many ways. However, I think the remarkable digital technology and the existing infrastructure, and another one is the collaboration of government agency and private institution. And the last one, accumulated knowledge from the expert with the democratic leadership was contributing to this kind of outputs and performance. Next, please. In COVID-19 pandemics, one of the consensus is that trustable information and strong leadership to address the disease. In this sense, open data policy is the government's policy priority to engage the public and private. As the development and evolution of the artificial intelligence and the data technologies, public data became a key resources to cooperation and business. Over years, Korean governments have introduced open data policy. For governments, it was a way to transparency of a policymaking process and to open resources to further development in private sector. Facing with the pandemics, this opportunity certainly favor a way to empower the public with reliable and trusted information rather than manipulated information such as disinformation or misinformation. Next, please. The COVID-19 crisis clearly shows us affordable digital infrastructure and digital systems are lifeline to sustain society and inclusive nation. As we already recognize the need of the digital transformation, but this crisis further accelerating the digital government as we expected. Especially the digital government can be one of the vehicles to overcome COVID-19, but also can be an instrument to preparing post-COVID-19 areas by saving economic systems and protecting vulnerable social classes who face challenges in daily life. Next, please. As reflecting those lessons brought by the COVID-19 crisis, Korean governments adopted 4 core tasks in accordance with the 4 stages to recovering from the crisis and copy with the post-COVID-19 areas. The Korean government will implement to reinforce digital infrastructure and the digital government while investing in the sector. The other one is encouraging public and private cooperation and fostering non-contact industry and the service. In this sense, the government initiated Digital New Deal project in last year, which aimed to revitalize the economic system throughout the innovation, technology, and the green economy policy, protecting vulnerable social classes. Throughout this effort, the nation is look forward to become a leading country in terms of ICT development and digital government. Next, please. Thank you for attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chang, for a very insightful presentation on the Korean government's response and its leveraging of the existing digital infrastructure. Some very useful points, harmonizing the digital and the social infrastructure to lead to outcomes that are empowering for the people. Thank you very much. Please stay on for questions towards the end. We'll now move on to the third speaker, Dr. Shireen Madon, who will talk about, who will take the agenda further from digital infrastructure to empowerment. And may I request the host to play the video that she has sent, please?
Hello, everyone. I'm Shireen Madon, Associate Professor at the London School of Economics, LSE, working in the Department of Management and the Department of International Development. It's an honor for me to be part of this event, and I'd like to thank Professor Prakash for inviting me. My only regret is that I wasn't able to join you in person. Let me just share my screen with you to begin with, start my presentation. Okay. So my contribution is entitled E-Governance for Service Delivery, focusing on local practice. And let me start by talking first of all about the rationale. What I see is the rationale for e-governance implementations for service delivery. I believe that this rationale converges around four main principles of accountability, efficiency/effectiveness, transparency/openness, and participation and inclusion. All of these, as we know, have been part and parcel of the broader good governance mandate. And a fundamental assumption has been that these four principles of service delivery will improve the status quo, and that information technology in particular will facilitate the achievement of improved accountability, efficiency, effectiveness, etc. Indeed, we know that an integral part of governance is related to the collection and the processing of data. And we can find quotations like this, one by the World Bank, dotted around in different websites. So these different functions of e-governance that we can see in the quotation there have been seen as the focus of policy. In other words, efficiency of service delivery, improved interface between business, citizens, industry, government, and increasing access to information. The diagram here is
Yeah, I guess the host will have to mute others who are not speaking.
Really very much about improving functions. Basically, menu-driven back-end applications. Decentralized planning. And in fact, my first experience of computerization in India was looking at one of the NIC systems, National Informatics Center systems called CRISP, Computer-Aided Rural Information Systems Project, which had been put in place for improving the management of, at that time, Integrated Rural Development Program. What we found with that experiment was something that we continue to see, and that was that the menu-driven system was not relevant for functioning and operations at the level of the district rural development agencies. However, at that time, end-user computing, spreadsheets, databases were coming into their own, and they fitted much more with the realities of what the managers at DRDA level wanted to do, such as sorting out beneficiaries in terms of income levels, in terms of matching the assets which were given through the program to what citizens wanted. However, from the 2000s onwards, we saw a wholesale shift in approach from user departments' usage of IT to citizen-centric front-end applications of the kind that we know. We are talking about entitlements, we're talking about kiosks set up at the district level, and we're also talking about telecenters in rural areas, which was set up basically as an outreach for providing entitlements, local content, citizen grievance. And more recently, we have, from the 2016 onwards, we have e-governance, which tries to combine both the back and the front end. And this comes across a lot in the national biometric ID systems, where an attempt is made to streamline benefits to citizens and the entire supply chain of providing rations or fertilizers, but at the same time, trying to include more and more citizens so that they're seen by the state. And that fits very well into the mandate of the Sustainable Development Goals of identity and inclusion. So if we then turn to how have e-governance projects been evaluated? Most evaluation studies tend to be guided, I think, by the dominant view that e-governance is part of a formal strategy to improve service delivery. And here we're talking about functionality of the technology, this is the ways in which evaluation of e-governance projects tends to be done. In other words, is it supporting the best practice frameworks, typically as provided by Deloitte, Accenture, etc.? Or is it rationalizing administrative functions, typically measured in terms of efficiency gains to citizens and government, saving of time, saving of money? What about the design reality gap? Evaluations are typically done in terms of other discrepancies behind the design intention of an e-governance project and reality with respect to the quality of information and with respect to human resources, capabilities, etc. My argument here is that this presents an incomplete view because the real impact of e-governance interventions occurs through a process of fit between technology and local practice, which occurs after implementation. And this is a lesson we learned from the early legacy of the back-end application that I talked about. And so I'm just going to give two brief examples of what I'm talking about. First of all, telecenters for rural outreach of governance services. This is something I've been studying in Kerala since the start of the Akshaya project. As we know, this is a state well known throughout the world for its social development model and its legacy of political mobilization and citizen empowerment. In fact, this was one of the catalysts for spurring the Akshaya project. It was a planned approach by the Kerala State IT Mission in 2002 with funds from the ADB, and it was very much driven by local demand from political representatives in the pilot district of Malappuram. I remember going there, very beautiful district. And that was considered to be relatively backward with a large majority of small and marginal farmers with low per capita income. The district council wanted to promote education, particularly IT for women. And so this aligned with the Akshaya mandate of having the telecenters as more than just for entitlements, but as a development outreach facility. And certain number of centers, 630 were established and franchised to local entrepreneurs. These were entrepreneurs who were trusted by the community, and the location was also something they had a say in. Until the end of 2003, illiteracy was the main activity here, and that brought revenue to entrepreneurs and achieved a remarkable 100% illiteracy amongst, mainly amongst the women. However, after illiteracy, there was a range of other activities that took hold. This is just some examples of what was happening. Training, communication, using it for the payment of bills. By 2011, however, just about 212 centers were running. From this, two key lessons, I think, surface. One of them is about the sustainability of centers, which requires both financial, social, and political sustainability. In other words, the centers where the entrepreneurs had good relations with administrators, politicians, and the community were the ones that survived, not just the entrepreneurs who had a good business sense. And finally, domain expertise and local practice of government functionaries were key, critical for the success of Akshaya. In other words, one of the activities post the illiteracy phase was an activity called health mapping, which people may remember, and a time when door-to-door questionnaires about health ailments, about BP monitors, whether or not people felt that they were healthy. This particular application, however well-intentioned, did not take off because it was not undertaken at that time in conjunction with the primary health center. On the other hand, some centers started a farmers club, which adapted the earlier e-Krishi model, which was a web-based platform to guide farmers along the farming life cycle, which adapted it to the context of Malappuram and which encouraged the extension officer, the agricultural extension officer, to discuss issues of relevance, local farming practices, crop disease, marketing and input prices, etc. I'm going to have to rush a little bit, but my second example refers to what is more topical and current, which is the Aadhaar-enabled fertilizer distribution system now rolled out throughout the country. And this is based on a study that we've been doing in the Krishna district of Andhra Pradesh. Of interest to us was how the UIDAI's central core database integrates with processes at the local level. And one of the things that spurred our interest here was a quotation from Nilekani, Nandan Nilekani, that we visited him at the start of the research. And he did say that Aadhaar is only a platform. Now it's up to local governments and district authorities to create applications where they collate local data to Aadhaar. So here the argument that I'm trying to make is that digital platforms, yes, can, in theory, provide an opportunity for local government intelligence to help in the creation of value for social assistance programming. So we see the way in which the UIDAI, the government, the central government, can orchestrate the activities of complementary stakeholders and technologies and mobile banking services. There are various agencies such as the retail outlets, the block and the district government and the state offices and the cooperatives which come into play for the distribution of fertilizer. They also complement, they also constitute very important complementaries. And they are also the ultimate users of that unique identification system. So the Aadhaar-enabled fertilizer distribution system was designated to coordinate 3 different databases. I'm sure people are aware of that there's the core ID database, the Webland database, which records data on land holdings and entitlements, and then the health of the soil health database. But what we tried to do with this particular research is we tried to look at ways in which, apart from this, what were the local processes that were taking place following implementation and which required responsiveness, local responsiveness of retailers and of agencies at the district level, block and district level. And we found 3 examples of this. First of all, we found that retailers were not always positioned at the outlets. And the original system was designed that they had to key in their ID data, but it was modified over time. The district staff in Krishna district updated it to version 2.1, including an option for the retailer to nominate others to be present at the outlet. Secondly, buyers were not necessarily the landowner farmers. The buyers of the fertilizer, again, the system was designed in such a way originally that the buyers had to go themselves, but other people could be nominated. So the landowner might nominate the tenant farmer or even a relative. Once again, an adaptation, new tabs on the handheld device had to be designed and integrated at the district level. And finally, the buyers themselves were typically not bringing their Aadhaar card with them. They didn't have the number. Once again, workarounds were put in place. Several local practices emerged to enable the farmers to leave with their fertilizer. Sometimes they were asked to come back and on a piece of paper, on a small chit, their information would be recorded and then entered into the system. In some cases, the fertilizer was put onto the ID card of the next farmer in the queue. But once again, a record was taken of that so that the farmer would not go away with nothing. There were many other adaptations, like bypassing the recommended optimal fertilizer type and the quantity, if it was the case that the farmer needed more, wanted more than the maximum yield. He wanted the maximum yield from different plots of land. And so what was recommended by the EPOS device was not necessarily what he needed. Finally, then, what I'm trying to say here is, from my experience, e-governance projects which aim to improve service delivery to citizens require a lot of attention to be placed on local context and local practices. There is a constant process of reformulation that takes place at local level following the design and the implementation of e-governance systems. And this means that once designed, there should be flexibility built into the system to accommodate changes in order to remain relevant both to users and also to user organizations like the retail outlets. Okay, thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing the deliberations of this very exciting conference. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Shireen, for that wonderful insight into bringing in local practice and and talking about flexibility built into digital technologies, particularly when they are being used for empowerment and development related purposes. I've been told that when I unmute myself, there is a lot of buzzing noise, so I'll not speak much and hand over the floor to our next speaker, Dr. Joyjit Pag. Joyjit, please take over.
Hi, am I audible? Can someone let me know?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you. So thank you everyone for inviting me for this this event. I, like Shireen Madon before this, I also had a significant part of my career was at Akshaya project several years ago when I was doing my PhD. That was my PhD project in 2005, where I spent a lot of time in Mallapuram. So I also have connections to Akshaya, and very, very important project in the history of IT in India. So I'm going to be talking about misinformation today. I'll run us through a little bit of an overview of what is important about misinformation, and then conclude with some remarks about what might be relevant to misinformation in Kerala specific case. When I reach about 2 minutes from needing to wind up, somebody please do warn me so I know. Okay, so some of the basic drivers of misinformation, just to get a lay of the land, is there are epistemic reasons for misinformation. These typically tend to be people seeking some kind of closure. They're uncertain about a certain situation. So market speculation would be an example of when somebody might be inclined to believe misinformation about uncertainty in a certain situation that makes them believe certain things. Existential reasons could be about specific fears about one's own conditions and the ability for a society to remain stable, however you define that society. So health related pandemics are a good example of when you tend to have existential, am I going to live through this type of questions? And the last would be sociocultural reasons. And this, of course, is one set of characterizations. Sociocultural reasons for misinformation tend to be those reasons which you think of as these are reasons that my particular social group is somehow superior. So when you come to misinformation about other groups than oneself, that is a sort of social cultural kind of misinformation where you're saying something negative about the other group as a way of saying that your group is somehow superior. So these are like some of the overall ways of thinking about misinformation. There's various people who have looked at it from various perspectives. One option is to look at it from a utilitarian perspective, which is to say, okay, there is a certain situation, how do we fix it? Therefore, you think about many misinformation about, let's say, drinking garlic water and getting rid of COVID. So various people will send misinformation of one kind or the other, and you say, okay, well, this might be able to help me to fix this situation. The other is affective misinformation, in which case you're not trying to fix the situation, but you're trying to think about who do I blame for this situation, and that's a kind of different type of misinformation. So all these drivers are all around us all the time when we think about what kinds of misinformation we might ourselves be susceptible to. And a key part about thinking about misinformation is how news itself has changed. So if we look around the world right now at what percentage of people are consuming their news primarily through social media, that number is constantly rising. In several countries, that number is in excess of half the population, as you see from this slide from Statista. And in India itself, right now, we have active internet users at above 675 million users in 2020, and over 400 million social media users. So as opposed to the past, when we thought that things like social media and misinformation on social media are something which is restricted to the elite population, that is no longer true. Social media is a significant carrier of misinformation and information in general, not just misinformation, and that it is available through the wealthy and the poor and through many states of India. Yeah. Some of the major discussions around misinformation have been around the platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, etc. And it is important here to think about why is it that the platforms are not very effective at tackling misinformation. Certain kinds of misinformation they do tackle, but others they do not. One is that there is a difference between encrypted platforms, which is sort of a WhatsApp type of platform, or Signal, versus open platforms in which you can have a conversation and multiple people can be seeing what you're doing. Twitter, for example, is a public platform. So if you have certain kinds of misinformation on Twitter, it is easy that somebody might say, okay, no, there is something wrong with this. I'm going to challenge this misinformation, whereas the same might not be true for a closed WhatsApp group. So the corollary problem to that is that we also have very little sense of what is the extent of misinformation, both the expression of misinformation, which means how much misinformation I am putting out myself, as well as the consumption of misinformation. Both of those things are an issue. The definition of how you define the platform itself is very important. So a platform per se is a company or technology that enables communication and distribution of information. It enables it, versus a public publisher is a company that curates or distributes the content. So most of the technology companies will make the case that they are just platforms, and that therefore they cannot be held responsible for misinformation. And which is why sometimes you will have these, some of you might have heard about Section 230 of the Communication Decency Act in the United States. The reason why it is important is because these companies are all headquartered in the US, and so most of them are, and so therefore their main legal obligation is often to that country. So now, according to Section 230, the way to think about it is that if you are a bookseller, you cannot be held responsible for knowing what is inside the content of every book. So if there is something which is wrong with the book has some bad material or something, you cannot go after the bookseller for that. You have to go after the publisher for that. And so, in some sense, what the platforms are arguing is that they are like the bookseller, but they are not like the publisher, so they cannot be held responsible for that, right? And the US also has this sort of First Amendment culture. Now, First Amendment is actually in the US Constitution, which means that as an individual, you do not have First Amendment right against Facebook. So you cannot tell Facebook that I want to be able to say whatever it is on Facebook. Facebook as a private platform can control that. But because of the culture of First Amendment, there is always a real concern about censorship. And so platforms are very, very careful about censorship. Now, we can talk about what has happened in the last 1 month, which is really important with the banning of Trump, which is a really important. And then, thereafter, of course, there is several other cases as well of individuals being barred from communicating on social media. But this is an unusual case in with a major leader of a state, but it goes to some of the arguments we've been having about misinformation, or what happens when a significant leader of a country starts becoming the main source of misinformation. Okay, so there is also the other final issue of how national laws can have a chilling effect. So in general, platforms are often not beholden to national laws, but platforms might decide that there is too much legal. In some cases, they might be beholden to national law, but also they might decide that there is too much legal inconvenience with having certain kinds of material up on their platforms, and therefore they might choose not to get on those, allow that kind of speech. Now, this has a chilling effect on the people who are actually using it, and essentially that is not good business for the platforms themselves. The sad fact of the matter is that the platforms actually benefit from misinformation, because the more misinformation there is, the more people are consuming it. And so people tend to benefit. The platform itself is making money out of people doing this. But the platform also has a kind of tipping point where if there is too much misinformation, then you don't trust the platform anymore. You just move on to another platform. So that's another problem there. Yeah. Now, the bigger issue over here is that mainstream media itself is changing, and this is a real issue with why we see misinformation the way that we do. uh, Now, the way misinformation often is understood is just simply fake news. Now, that is not actually what is true. What is happening is, in misinformation, there's a spectrum from biased information to straight out disinformation, where I'm intending to tell you some lies, versus some cases I might just tell you some subsection of the truth. So you can say one is an example of something which is leaning towards a certain end of the political spectrum as a publisher, versus another end, and that's just bias, versus someone is just lying to you, right? And one important thing that has happened in news in the last few years is clickbaiting. And all of you must have noticed this, is that sometimes you're looking at some news and it says something very exciting. Click here to hello. Yeah. So click here to see what the face of Donald Trump after he lost the election, or something like that. And it's amazing that this, while I'm giving you an extreme example, the instances of clickbaiting as news has really increased to the point where you'll be seeing this even in mainstream news sources in India as elsewhere. Now, online media ecosystem rewards extreme behavior, which is to say that the more extreme sounding the news is, you'll actually notice also that over time we actually have evidence over from several research papers to show that polarization of news sources is growing. So you look at a certain news source, okay, this one is a left-leaning news source, or this one is a right-leaning news source, and so that polarization has been growing, and people tend to prefer that kind of news that they're listening to. Yeah. This also does something else, which is that it rewards journalists, especially those who are in a freelancing type of situation, to act as entrepreneurs. What this means is that now you'll see many journalists who are online who have 5, 10,000, 15,000 followers on platforms like Twitter. And very often when people are being hired, the editor might ask, like, okay, how many followers you have on Twitter, because they want to see whether that journalist is able to make certain kind of news go viral. Now, this obviously means that you are actually rewarding the journalist for saying more extreme things, and this also is another part of why mainstream media has gone after a slightly more extreme ways of doing journalism. And finally, there is more and more armchair reporting of things, which is journalists who are unable for funding reasons or whatever it is to go and do the real investigative reporting, which tends to be the most expensive kind of reporting, and instead moving to basically just doing reports on what is happening on Twitter. A great example is how many politicians now are only communicating on Twitter. So you cannot get a soundbite from the politician, you cannot reach the politician If you want to listen to what the politician says, you only have a choice to listen to what they are saying on Twitter. So entire journalism is happening only by looking at social media. This, of course, gives more credence to certain kinds of journalism. That's the point that I'm making here, rather than that journalism necessary is misinformation itself. Okay. Now, also what we see is there are certain enablers of mistrust. One is the concept of astroturfing. Astroturfing is just like you have astroturf for hockey. It is something that looks like grass, but it is not grass. Like that, the idea of astroturfing is when there is a small number of accounts which are highly effective in making something look like everybody's talking about it, but actually only a small number of people are talking about it. So this is the concept of trending news, viral news, which many of you must have come across, is that somebody will say, okay, let us make this news viral. And then within the next one day, they are able to make the news viral because that infrastructure is in place to make do that kind of thing. And of course,
Guys,
there's also, yes.
2 minutes more.
Okay. So then I'll just move along and talk about some of the key things over here. Misinformation has very detrimental effects for the overall information environment. It increases distrust and harassment, but also it increases the visibility of bad actors. I mean, Donald Trump being a very important case of that is that even when he was saying things which could be construed clearly as misinformation, the fact that he was saying them on social media made him more interesting to the news and so on and so forth. Yeah. Also, it has a problem of false equivalence, which is that very often you'll see that because of misinformation, journalists will find themselves trying to present the other side when the other side might be itself very not worthy of presenting. Climate would be a good example of the climate denial is not something which is a false equivalence to try and say that climate science, we have to show the other side as well. As I'm showing you here also that in India, we have significant cases of misinformation from all across the country on various issues, and mainstream media is very often the one which is helping with this kind of misinformation. There is also an issue of misinformation and mistrust. A great example of this is at the Rashtrapati Bhavan recently. There was a picture of Subhash Chandra Bose unveiled, and immediately there was the story going out. This is actually not Subhash Chandra Bose, but the actor Subhash Chandra Bose. Now, because there was a certain kind of mistrust in some cases, people went ahead and started spreading this piece of misinformation, and it got really viral very quickly. So we have really an information environment where people are really looking to click quickly, click like, retweet, etc., which makes this kind of spread much faster. I'm going to present two important statistics over here that internet users who agree on temporarily cutting off social media is acceptable to stop misinformation. The number one country in the world is India. So the number one country where users think that it's okay to stop internet is India over here. And also, this is also very interesting, is that India is the number one country where the people surveyed reply that they trust the government to do shutdowns. And this says something about the state of information in India as well. Again, I won't go into this, but I was going to give you some examples of what kinds of information misinformation there could be. Broadly, there is new and fabricated misinformation versus recirculated information, and the two of them have different technical challenges. With, like, you can find a matching image or a matching video which is recirculated, but it's much harder to dispute something when it is created new and when there's deep fakes and so on and so forth. Kerala is a very interesting case for misinformation. Because we obviously understand that technology is not enough. I'm happy to answer in Q&A on what some of the things we can do with technology and what we cannot. But also Kerala has a very good history of household level trust building because of local government people being aware of people at every household level. And so then you have an infrastructure in place where you can go out and meet people in the households and talk to them and so on and so forth. And Kerala also has one of the best cases of early training on misinformation. This was the Kannur case, which Mir Mohammad Ali, who was then the IAS officer of Kannur, had worked on these training sessions. And I, after spending a long time working on misinformation, really have come to believe that the best way to think about misinformation misinformation is to educate people finally. This is an image from a Kerala police case where a police website where they have been putting out pictures of people. And this is a very interesting picture because this is the police carrying out a protester, but it's done with the person smiling. So this is a case of brand building for the police. And the reason why I will say this is important, this is my last slide. And of course, many of the viewers here will be very familiar with this images of Dasan Vijayan and action hero Biju, which is that these are images from the Kerala Police's initiative to do outreach. And it is a very good case of how a police which is doing very serious work is really using humor as a way to get more people to buy into their online service. And so as a result, you have an institution which has the power to reach the people, and that kind of trust building is central to dealing with the misinformation problem, because technological techniques will never be sufficient to tackle it. So I'm sorry I went a little bit over, but I will stop here.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Joyjit. Let me invite our next set of speakers, Anju Mangal and Osama Manzur from Alliance for Affordable Internet at the World Wide Web Foundation. We'll have some time for question and answers after this talk by Anju and Osama. Anju, Osama, if you're around, maybe
Yes.
you can
Yes,
get started.
Anju will start and I will follow.
Great, thank you so much. Namaste, namaskaram, and good morning and good afternoon to all our stakeholders, Government of Kerala, and experts. Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to present today. We will be doing a joint presentation. So Osama, my colleague, and also the founder of A4AI will be doing the joint presentation on affordability and meaningful access to connect the last 50%. So just before we go on to the technical and research work that we're doing, I'm just going to talk about what we are doing. Alliance for Affordable Internet, which is an initiative of the World Wide Web Foundation. And we are the broadest technology sector alliance working to drive down the cost of broadband internet connectivity. And we do this through policy and regulatory reforms and frameworks. And so we have public-private civil society collaboration in over more than 100 member organizations, and we cut across various regions. So I am specifically working in the Asia-Pacific region, but we also have my counterparts and my colleagues who are focusing on Latin America, Caribbean, Africa, and globally we also have our partners in around the world, And we have in terms of collaboration and partnership, we have endorsed one set of good practices. So it's all about making sure that we understand internet freedom. We adhere to the principles of internet freedom, the fundamental rights of expression, and making sure that the communities, the people have a voice. So having the web as an open, secure, and free platform to use. So what do we do in the country? So a lot of our work is with the member countries, and we believe in a multi-stakeholder coalition. So we work with civil society, public sector, private sector, but our engagement or our country partners are usually the governments, and we sort of work together to look at key barriers to affordable access, but we also look at tailored solutions to drive prices down. So I'll just give you an example. We're currently working with Bangladesh and looking at developing their broadband strategy and reviewing their current broadband policy. And in line with that broadband policy, we're also looking at doing a roadmap and then bringing in key partners, civil society, public sector, private sector, to make sure that they have a voice when we are developing the strategy. So a lot of our work is challenging, but we are very much focused on national coalitions and stakeholders. While we are looking at building and developing the policies to improve affordability, we make sure that we have an all-inclusive approach. So our all-inclusive approach is making sure that we have designed gender-responsive policy, and also looking at inviting persons with disabilities and other vulnerable communities to be part of the discussions as well. And so the work that we do is, like, for example, we try to collect some of the gender and poverty disaggregated data to track the SDGs, and we look at expanding public access initiatives, and also like looking at doing community networks. And of course, Osama will talk about that, and maybe talk about in terms of the case studies that he's working on. So just briefly, in terms of the, I just thought that it might be good for me to talk about the global investments needed to ensure a universal access by 2030. And so we did this report for ITU. So we need around $428 billion to achieve universal access by 2030. And a lot of this is related to infrastructure and investment challenge. And you can see on the graph, on the presentation, that you need 40 billion for ICT skills and content. You need 104 billion for mobile infrastructure, and around 6 billion for policy and regulation. And a lot of this investment is needed for South Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and East Asia and Pacific. And this is why we are trying very hard to work with the governments and also the key stakeholders to find ways to connect the unconnected. And because a lot of the population and 55% of required investment is needed, especially in East Asia, Pacific, and South Asia. Oh, okay. Sorry. So yeah, so infrastructure alone is not sufficient. So so beyond infrastructure, we're also looking at complementary initiatives to connect the people. So we look at increasing support device affordability. We look at affordability of data and services, digital skills programs, and content. And I mentioned earlier is that we are trying very hard to close the digital gender gap. And all this is very relevant for e-government services. I've been working in the e-government services prior to joining Web Foundation and A4AI, and I've worked in the e-agriculture, e-education sector. And a lot of the work that we do in terms of e-government, the other sectors are not part of the discussion or the conversation. So I think this is one of the things that I wanted to mention, is that when we are developing an e-government service, we need to have a business analysis approach. It's not just about the technology, but it's about the people, and also how do we make sure that the processes are simple and easy to use. I'm now going to hand it over to Osama to talk about some of the research work and the policy advocacy work that we are doing in Asia. Osama.
Yeah, hi, good morning, and now it's good afternoon. I think it's very hard to be the last one to talk, but it's good to see the sustained presence of the people who are participating. You know, while we have been listening everyone, and there is this, you know, expectation of this conference that Kerala wants to look ahead. It's very ironical that everyone in the country looks ahead to Kerala to learn what Kerala is doing so that we can also implement, being one of those states who were the 100% digital literacy many, many years back in Malappuram. And many people have this background of visiting Malappuram, including myself, when I was doing research and, you know, the very recent years of starting Digital Empowerment Foundation when Aruna was their IT secretary, and I visited Malappuram. So coming from that entire 15 to 20 years of what Kerala has achieved, I was just trying to come to this conclusion that, you know, how we can actually suggest some of the things that Kerala should do based on, like A4AI. I have been associated with them, and one of the things that I learned from them is that why connectivity has to be extremely meaningful. You know, without that, and COVID really showed us that digital divide, we never talked in the last 10 years, suddenly has become one of the most important issue. You know, I'm sure in Kerala itself, there will be people will be higher digital divided now, because you must have realized that you can't do education online because of the bandwidth. You can't do, you know, e-commerce online because of the, you know, limited connectivity or so on and so forth. So I have just made a small little chart to share with all of you. If that I can share, and maybe I can, to do this, I am uploading it to the chat box and everybody we can see, but I can also using this camera for everyone to see that what Kerala can look for and what Kerala should look ahead. And I will read out that, Kerala should, from the perspective, because this session is about e-governance and citizen services. So that means Kerala is very much bothered about how to use digital technology to serve the people. People means masses. And I thought that it's very important that digital infrastructure with adequate bandwidth at the last mile is one of their hallmark requirement that they are working on with optic fiber in any case, but how we can actually fast forward it. How we can create a cadre-based information buster and information service provider, which actually Jurjit also gave one example of, that at a community level, can you have a woman-driven information service provider who is also an information buster, misinformation buster, and fake news fighter. It's an identified, trained woman, because if woman is that person, you will have more trust. How you can make all schools seamlessly digital public access points where labs are highly bandwidth connected and the labs are so big that every kid is actually accessing without any issue, because it's very hard to provide tablet and computers to each and every child and in the household, and it may not be even healthy going long term. So can you create that one? Can we have instilling coding as a necessary language in all schools? And coding should not be seen as a digital, digitization. It should be seen as is the language of the future. And therefore, you instill that language of the future as a necessary language in all these schools, if possible, as a language. Also, can we establish makerspace at all and every block level? Makerspace is a place where people can come and innovate and experiment and innovate, and it should be free. It should not be based on qualifications, certificate, and background, and so on and so forth. Can Kerala take a responsibility of creating a digital integration norms? It's very important that, you remember 20, 25 years before when Facebook came, it was connecting people. Now Facebook is one of the biggest platform of, hatred of information. Why? Suddenly why data has become commercialized so much that I don't bother about the humanity, but we bother about data. So can Kerala government and Kerala institutions create digital integration norms for themselves and for the nation? What could be the netiquettes? What could be the adoption? What could be the community-based access norms? How do you really adopt it? Because in COVID, we were not knowing when we are connected, which room are we running to? Which toilet we are running to? How we are actually fighting with each other for accessing things. We didn't know how to mute. We didn't know how to not use more than certain number of hours. We don't know where we are accessing content which is going beyond its necessity and going into toxicity. So can Kerala develop those kind of things? And in the middle of all this, can you frame all the principles and policies on meaningful connectivity as number one? And the second is women-driven. Is this possible if these two things? Then we are certainly looking, while you, Kerala, looking ahead to get something, you will be the one that we continue to look ahead to Kerala to see how we can adopt digital in our lives. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Anju, and thank you, Osama, for a nice kind of conclusion to this set of talks. I guess we did look at the digital infrastructure, we looked at applications, we looked at issues of affordability, looked at issues of trust, concerns around misinformation, and looking at the blending of the digital and the social infrastructure, flexibility, all that. I think that was a very interesting series of talks. I'm very sorry for rushing all my speakers with a 15-minute kind of tight slot to put all of you in. But I know this is lunchtime. We have about 10 minutes for some interactions. There are a couple of questions that I see in the chat window. One is for Dr. Chang. Dr. Chang, there's a question from Mr. Namashivayam, and he wants to know, how do you protect data privacy in PPP contracts? So public-private partnership contracts, how do you protect data privacy? Would you like to take that question, please?
Thank you, chairs. And I already mentioned my answer to the in chat box. So there are so many discussion to the privacy and protections, and you medias or our discussion to the ICT development. However, at least in Korea, there are so many kinds of law and regulation and guidelines implementing to the government agency levels. For example, last year, for the first time, the government established a single data protection privacy institution calling to the Personal Information Protection Commission, which is the integrations of all of the related subject, a single commission to governing to the data privacy. However, in these years, there are another discussion to the data protection commissions or another government agency, because the privacy and the data privacy is a rolling and burning issue. So it is ongoing discussion to the protection, privacy, and the data as the part of all of the project, including to the PPP project as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Another question is for Joyjit from Mr. Namashivayam. How could governments handle misinformation, and what kind of infrastructure is required to handle misinformation by state agencies?
Hi. Yeah. So I think some of the things I outlined, I really liked the way Osama also took on the basic suggestion of something in the equivalent of at the block level, if you have people who are doing day-to-day outreach, Vanita, something where you have a way of reaching people at their homes. There is a likelihood if you're doing that, then you also have WhatsApp groups for those areas, right? So there is needed. Do you need to have some kind of a combination of things like the Press Information Bureau or any kind of fact checker space, which over time we'll see more and more products like this coming up. Right now, you already have somewhere you can, if you have a WhatsApp message which you have some doubt about, you can send it to certain sites, and then they will give you the verdict on whether or not they know it to be a debunked piece of misinformation. But the reason why I bring out this block level point, because you have the experience of Akshaya and you know what it's like to actually go all the way out to people, and that is a good way to keep tabs on what kinds of misinformation people are being subjected to. The thing to realize, the most important thing to realize, is that misinformation is also coming with a problem of radicalization. And the reason why I brought about that Subhash Chandra Bose picture is that a lot of the people who put out that picture were people who were very familiar with what kind of misinformation is out there, which is to say that just because a person is well educated and all that, that does not mean that they will not indulge in misinformation themselves if that misinformation aligns with their system of beliefs. So I think I bring back that issue of the Kannur case because the IAS officer there really understood that the way to tackle misinformation is to make people doubt things. And that's a very important skill to have from an early age. You are given a piece of information, you say, okay, am I absolutely sure that this is true? And really engaging people with critical thinking from an early stage on. And there is no doubt that if there is one state where this has seen a significant amount of progress, that is Kerala. You want to increase that culture of critically looking at information.
Thank you, Joyjit. There's one question for Anju and Osama. You're looking at affordability of the internet. In terms of content accessibility, what is it that your alliance, or what are the, say, efforts going on currently across the world? Because content on the internet continues to be representative of small sections of, say, dominant social groups. What kind of efforts are required to ensure that more and more social groups, more and more voices get represented on the internet?
Anju, you want to say something first? You are muted.
I'll just talk in regards to the World Wide Web Foundation and also Alliance for Affordable Internet. But in regards to World Wide Web Foundation, we've been doing quite a lot of work to make sure that we include communities to be part of the discussions that we are having. So one of the things that I will just give you an example is we talk a lot about online gender-based violence, and there's quite a lot of issues related to content sensitivity, issues for women and girls that are going online. And so what are we doing to make sure that the voices of these women are heard so that policymakers are able to make decisions based on their voices? So we are doing quite a lot of policy advocacy work. We've started doing in terms of the global the global sector. We are looking at doing lots of consultations at the global level, but we are now sort of trickling it down to the regional and national level. So we're talking to the regional counterparts, but also the national counterparts who are already doing a lot of work in the area of online gender-based violence, because a lot of that is related to the content that people put online. And so how do we deal with this sort of issues is something that we are tackling. And so based on this, we're doing quite a lot of trainings as well. So we will be doing, say, a training in Bangladesh in the coming months, and also looking at how do we bring in the policymakers and also the civil society to make sure that, you know, we are connecting the dots, because a lot of it is about trying to connect the dots. And sometimes when you're talking to policymakers, the other civil society are not being heard. So it is our responsibility to bring in the right people at the right time and to make sure that everyone's voices are heard. So I'll just leave it at that, and maybe Osama can give another example from his point of view.
I'll take 2 minutes to just add to what Amit, you asked about the question, is that, you know, and this is this learning came from the COVID time, is that production of content, consumption of content, and the challenges of digital platform. And all three in the COVID time gave us a level of quality of connectivity that we have available, the languages in which we want to reach to the people with the available content, and do we have a content available in the audiovisual medium or audiovisual platform that is required by the people, supported by the connectivity. And these three challenges that the whole nation actually face. It's very important that we use audio, video, and image-based content, and also use the power of people as a mass. Any content made for the masses, we should stress on content made by the masses. You know, that's very, very important, because then you can also create your own community where you can source the content and disseminate the content. And we have seen many examples of how YouTube has become a channel for many teaching and learning and things like that. And I'm sure Kerala would have much more examples like that. I just want to end by saying that we just recently, about 1 month back, we did a 4,000 people survey to find a digital divide issue and how content is a big issue in terms of the gender digital divide, and also the access point available and all the device availability. And it's pathetic in most of the situation in the country, where gender are almost like Haryana has 100% disparity of digital access. Can you believe it? The South states have a little better, but they are also not better to the level of 50% or something like that. It's much worse. So it's very important that we look at content access from the perspective of digital infrastructure, digital content availability, how masses are contributing to produce it, and how it is friendly to the devices that is largely available to the people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think production of content and production and contributing to the internet as producers needs to be much more, or needs to involve more and more people. There are efforts around this. I think this idea of a voice-based internet has been talked about quite a lot, and maybe we'll see a lot more going forward. We have run out of time, and I'm sorry we'll not be able to take any more questions. But let me thank all my speakers for their time, for joining from different parts of the world at very inconvenient times, and sharing their words of wisdom with all of us. Thank you very much. I'll hand it over to Dr. Santosh of the Kerala State Planning Board.
Okay, respected Chairperson Professor Amit Prakash, internationally renowned speakers, distinguished delegates from Zoom platform, YouTube, and other social media platforms. We have had a wonderful session on citizen access to service and empowerment. The presentation well covered with the address to various issues and aspects on e-governance. Starting from the first speaker, Dr. Jain Bhatnagar. He mentioned about the C-Dot initiatives or achievements, technological developments to various applications. And Dr. Chang Engson, he has mentioned about the COVID-19 tracking issues, all these things, and open data policy to empowerment people. Dr. Shireen Madan, she mentioned about need for evaluation of e-governance projects. Dr. Jojit Paul mentioned about the challenges on social media platforms, media and misinformation. And last speaker, Ms. Anju Mangal, she mentioned about a World Wide Fund Foundation, public-private sector, civil society aspects are missing, and need for digital integration to Kerala also she mentioned in this speech. So on the behalf of State Planning Board, I would like to express my sincere thanks to all the speakers and the introductory remarks. Welcome address by Mr. Safarullah Saab. On behalf of State Planning Board, I express my sincere thanks to Safarullah Saab. Then our Honorable Vice Chairman, actually he was the driving force behind for initiating this workshop, international conference. And 3 months back, actually he mentioned that we have to make IIIT Bangalore as our knowledge partner, and we have conducted some 5-6 round discussions for the conceptualization of this meeting, and the identification of speakers and the time schedules, everything. Mr. Dr. Namashivayam was there. Professor Amit Shah, he was a leader in the IIIT Bangalore. That Safarullah sir and myself and our member secretary were involved in that meeting. We have come out with this structure of this conference. On behalf of State Planning, I thanks to the knowledge partner IIIT Bangalore of this workshop. And I would also many senior officials also participated in various platforms here. On behalf of State Planning, I would like to thank all the senior officials and delegates in this room. Here the conference secretariat is here under the team leadership of Ms. Gayatri Nair. On behalf of State Planning, I would like to express my thanks to all his Gayatri Madam and her team for very effectively organizing this seminar. I also thank my division staffs here. On behalf of State Planning Board and myself, I express my sincere thanks to all my colleagues here in the Planning Board and my divisions. So the once again, thanks all for participating in section. And I would like to invite for the next section, which starts at 2 p.m. and the third section at 4 p.m. I would like to invite all the delegates to participate that session also. Thank you very much. Okay, we can close the session. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Welcome, welcome.
Thank you, Anju.